Hi guys, this is Ami here. I just wanted to give you a quick micro training to address some of the questions that have come up today as a result of some of the changes in the new callback system. First of all, thank you everyone for all the calls you're making. It's such an important thing to just be with survivors in a conversation, even a returned voicemail message, because it helps affirm to them that when they did reach out for help, that they're not alone in the world. So for those of you who feel concerned about if you're getting through or if you're doing any good, I just want to affirm for you that just the act of being on the phone with someone can be profoundly beneficial for their own individual recovery process in ways you may never see or know. That said, I was just talking with Erin about this. Something that can happen to volunteers when we're on the phone is a sense that we have to promise them, like, don't worry, there will be help, you'll get help, someone will be there soon. Those kind of phrases, I think, naturally would come out of our mouths, particularly people inspired to do this kind of work. We want to offer reassurances. But someone else wrote in today, like, gosh, if we're not going to call them back or people can't get there, I feel like I'm lying. It's a really good point. You are, of course, not encouraged to lie in any way. It's definitely not what crisis cleanup is about. Crisis cleanup primarily is about getting properties logged into that database so that each survivor has a chance at a volunteer org coming to their home to help with mucking and gutting, tree removal, debris removal, in some cases mold sanitization. And what's the other one they do a lot of? One of those top four. So here, just because I know some of us are newer at this and some have worked in the mucking and gutting side and some have not, when we put an address into that database, the idea is that one of the voluntary organizations that's active in disaster and is registered to claim properties from crisis cleanup, of which there are many, will come in and they'll look at certain areas and they'll say, hey, within this area, who matches our demographic of who we need to get to first? They have their own ways of sort of triaging what they come up with in that database based on where they are, based on who they tend to serve, based on whether or not they have sawyers, like people that actually do that tree work, or whether they have all the tools necessary to do mucking and gutting and debris removal, sometimes heavy equipment or not. Each organization has to determine for themselves what is their own capacity, and then they'll prioritize who they serve based on that. That said, I want to offer you some phrases and things that might be helpful in your own scripting of a message. So we never want to say to someone, hey, once we have your information in the system, a volunteer organization is definitely on their way to your house. That's absolutely not the case. In some cases, in fact, at this point, as we're getting further away from the date of the disaster, each one of those cases that goes in is likely to be somewhere between 6 to maybe 10 weeks before someone even is able to get back to them. So, because there were so many already in the system. That said, you want to really manage the expectations of the homeowner. They definitely don't need a secondary disaster, a secondary trauma, and none of us want to be the cause of that. So a way to work around that is to tell them, we are a volunteer org whose whole orientation is to help other volunteer orgs get information of who needs help so that they can identify if they have funding and teams and people to come out. So when we put your name in the system, we are not the organization who will do the cleanup, but hopefully by having your information in here, more organizations may be able to expand their capacity to get to you sooner. However, please do not be exclusively dependent on this system. We are not a government agency. We are not a funded organization. For that reason, there may be a shortage of volunteers who can get to your home. So what I want to encourage you to do is reach out to your neighbors still, ask them who helped them with their work. Reach out to local churches, any kind of community orgs, community centers. Definitely encourage people to call 211 I did that myself here from Pensacola, and it offered me an option if you were a Hurricane Michael survivor to text a certain number, and then it gave me a series of lists that they could connect me with different kinds of help I might need. So definitely refer people to 211. But be careful and resist in that immense pressure to make promises. Resist doing that. Tell them, really, I just wanted to call tonight to just hear your story a little bit and to hear where you might need some help. And those little conversations might be so significant that they just got to talk to someone. I talked to one woman who, she was on her way into church. She had a ton of help. She didn't need other help, but her son had been missing for 2 weeks after the disaster. He lived on the other side of town. Her young son was with her. Her young son was traumatized. Her son on the other side of the town was missing for 2 weeks. And I could tell by her pacing and her way of talking that she was still really, really upset. So she was happy to just talk about the story and have someone just listen. That's really a great goal to have while we're in this callback phase and we have this extraordinarily high number of calls to make and people to talk to. If you can just check in, have a conversation with them, share with them a few other resources. That psychological hotline number may be useful. You can ask them, hey, are there other hotline numbers I can help you find so that you get the support you need? Do you know that you can reach out to the local Salvation Army and Catholic Charities as disaster case management teams start to come on board? Be paying attention to whatever kind of resources you hear about so you are a little bit informed to offer them some. And if you just offer 211, again, that's good. I think I'm repeating myself, but I just want to really make sure you feel comfortable. You feel comfortable to deliver the message. So I'll tell you a little bit what I do in case this is useful for this micro training. Someone picks up the phone. I'll normally say, hi, this is Ami with Crisis Cleanup, the volunteer hotline you called quite some time ago, and we are just reaching out to check in and see where you're currently at with your recovery process and what you might need some assistance with. How is your home? Do you still need some cleanup help? At which point they'll say, oh no, you're too late, or oh yes, of course, or I have most of it, but I need a little bit. And that's when I start taking notes. I put those notes into the work request section, where if they say, I already had the front yard cleared, but I have some in the backyard. My next question would be like, oh, okay, if there's trees in the backyard, are any of those dangerous at this point? Do they still have a hanging limb off of them that moves when it's windy, or is there a chance that it could still fall on the house? Are there any trees currently on the house? Are there any trees blocking the egress to your entryways? Find out things like that. If they say the roof is damaged, you could say, is there water coming in currently when it rains? Do you have a strategy to get that tarped sooner than later? Because the longer water gets in, oftentimes insurance companies will say that the mold that comes up after the disaster is not from the disaster, it's from the roof not being tarped. So I encourage people, make sure you have your roof tarped. Grab some neighbors, do anything you can, register with the Blue Roof Project, call the FEMA hotline, go to the disaster recovery center closest to you and say, I really need a tarp urgently. If you have an insurance company, call them every day telling them, I need tarping, my property is being damaged, every day without a tarp. Encourage them to do that. If they do have insurance, I also encourage them to call that repeatedly. It's been my experience that if somebody calls their insurance once or twice a week after a disaster, it's not a bad thing to stay present and front of mind, to let them know they may have some contractors they want to engage. They're just waiting for their insurance check. Just kind of be on their side, encouraging them to take action. Something that really happens to disaster trauma survivors is a paralysis. We all may know about this. There's a moment where it just feels so overwhelming you can't do anything. Maybe one of the best things you do on these hotline calls is you give them a little bit of courage, confidence, and motivation to call their insurance adjuster in the morning, or reach out to their friends, or go walk through their neighborhood and ask some people what they've done. If you can encourage them to take some action, that's a huge win. And then if you can get them registered in the system, try and pay attention to if it sounds like there's specifically danger and safety issues at hand. And if there are, make sure those go into the work requests. My experience with the volunteer orgs is they do look for situations that sound a little more dangerous or a little more dire. It's good to make note of those in the work requests. Okay, that said, you are all empowered to make empowering calls. I know you can do this. We saw the number of callbacks to make go up, and that is because some of you have been asking, what happens if I tell them, hey, we'll try you again? What happens is now it's in the system for a secondary callback. So we got that number down into the 2000s, but it's back into the 3000s because some of those who still need a callback will be cycled through. So you can count on that. That's happening. Also, Hurricane Florence and Hurricane Michael did use the same hotline number because they happened so quickly. So you may find that you are calling people from Florence and Michael. So be sure in your work request to indicate whether it was Hurricane Michael or Hurricane Florence. Okay, if I forgot anything, I don't know what it is, but thank you so much for listening. Feel free to call or text me, or make any of the help requests you can through the website with any technical difficulties. Thank you, and I hope you continue to have a wonderful holiday.